On today's Live Open Daily, another virtual reality app developer is releasing their own headset and is set to come to market very soon. I'm your host, Live Open Mike. That company is Somnium Space, and today we're talking about their new headset, the Somnium VR1. This is another in a line of virtual reality app developers, after a list I'll tell you about in just a minute, that has decided there's a market inefficiency in the VR space and they are releasing their own headset to hopefully fill that gap. This is intended for it to be a high-end enthusiast headset and is priced appropriately, but the technology and the specs in here are pretty eye-popping. If you're not familiar with what Somnium Space is, I'm going to read this directly from their guide. Somnium Space VR is a persistent 3D world where you can find 5,000 land parcels, each owned by individual users. In addition to the main world, you can find many different parallel worlds which are also owned by users. Each land parcel in the world is defined on the Ethereum blockchain, in addition to a lot of other content like avatars, artwork, cars, kayaks, clothes, and much more. With your own parcel, you can build anything to your imagination's desire: an art structure, a business meeting office, an art gallery, an event hall, a place to socialize, or a virtual portfolio for your work, and more. This universe is actually accessible from 3 platforms: VR, PC, and web, which is usable on mobile as well. With most of the focus on the VR experience, Somnium Space is an alternate reality to connect with your customers, your friends, and or even your fans. With a very rich community all over the earth, Somnium Space is growing and proposes more and more activities and opportunities each and every day. There is no target audience for this metaverse. Everyone is welcome and anyone can participate in the future of this social platform. So that's what Somnium Space is. It launched on Steam, and let me get the exact date. Launched on Steam February 20th, 2020. It currently sits with a rating of mixed based on 84 reviews. Just scrolling through some of these reviews, a lot of them are pretty negative, at least the most recent ones are pretty negative, and they're calling out things like saying it's a blockchain scam, it's part of the crypto boom that happened during the pandemic, so on and so forth. So Somnium Space was basically proposing to be, and I've seen a couple of apps pop up like this. Multiverse is another one. That was from the developers of a game that just released on Quest, and I think it's on PC now, called The Flip, which is a co-op zombie shooter. Basically having virtual real estate where you can just you can buy parcels, just like I just described. You can buy parcels and build stores and marketplaces and things like that. My company that I work for, 3 Pound Games, actually did a game event for one of the games that we released in one of these spaces in Multiverse, where we had like a big amphitheater where you could see the trailer for the game, and then there was a portal where you could hop directly into the game on your quest and play it from there. So it's a bit of a different social experience than something like VR chat, which is meant to be primarily social. This one goes more into like the monetization of it with marketplaces and things like that. If you're someone who's a little dicey on things like crypto and blockchain, and I'm not going to blame you, I'm one of them. This actually did put off a lot of people from some of these websites, but they did enjoy a pretty active user base. Getting onto the headset, Somnium is following in the steps of companies like Bigscreen. Most of you know what Bigscreen is, the application where you can watch movies. They recently shipped the Bigscreen Beyond earlier this year, a very tiny PCVR only headset with really high-end displays. It actually did not come with controllers. You had to use Steam Lighthouses and Steam Knuckles to be able to play it, because the headset cost $1,000 and that was just for the headset itself. There's also, this one hasn't released yet, there's also the visor from Immersed. Immersed is a productivity app where you can use like multiple monitors and things like that within your headset to work virtually without having to buy. Like I have 3 monitors here, which total probably, I don't know, somewhere around $600 or $700. If you use something like Immersed, then you can actually have virtual monitors, and all you need is just your headset connected to your computer to be able to work effectively. And the other headset, this one was just announced a few weeks ago, is from, I only know him as Six. He's the developer of an app called Your, Y-U-R. And he's had multiple problems with Meta over the course of the years. As he explains it, Meta basically blocked the app from going to the main store and then later released the Move app, taking a lot of the core concepts of what Your was about. Six is releasing a workout/exercise specific headset for people to be able to use for fitness purposes. If you've ever used your Quest or any other VR headset for exercise, depending on like the status of the facial interface, it might actually give you a rash, or might just absorb the sweat and become a really disgusting sponge. He's developing a headset to basically hopefully counteract that and be something that people can work out in VR comfortably in. And then we have the Somnium VR1. This headset is set to start at €1,899. That translates to about $2,050 USD. I'll read through some of the specs here, just going through the website. It's going to have dual lens, aspheric modules, 35 ppd peak fidelity. For the record, for comparison, if you have a Quest 3, that's somewhere in the high teens. I think it's 18 to 19, something like that, ppd. That's pixels per degree for people who don't know what that stands for. The FOV, field of view, is 125 degrees horizontal by 100 degrees vertical. And the resolution is supposed to be 2880 by 2880 per eye. It will come equipped with hand tracking. We're going to be a little bit more specific about that in just a second, but the hand tracking is supposed to track at 120 hertz. I think your Quest only runs at about 60 if you have a Quest 3. Now, when I said the starting price, and this is where it becomes really important, there are actually going to be multiple models of this where you can actually customize your headset to be basically as sophisticated or as basic as you want. So starting at 1,900 euros or $2,000, basically, you can get just a VR headset, and then you can add on eye tracking, or add on eye tracking and hand tracking, or add on eye tracking, hand tracking, and mixed reality. None of those other 3 features I just named will come standard with the headset. So this thing, I'm gonna guess by the time you get every single option in there, because we don't have full pricing on this yet, it's probably gonna be somewhere in the range of about $3,000. So why does this headset exist? Because that was a question I saw come up in a lot of like Discords and other places. This headset is set to start releasing for people who reserve their spots to order the headset. It's going to start releasing orders to them tomorrow, June 20th, as I record this podcast. The same thing happened when Bigscreen first announced that they were going to be making the Beyond, and that was one of them. I said, why do we need more headsets? Well, we need is software. To a certain extent, I generally still believe that, but I have turned around my thought process on having more headsets in the market, because just like phones, for instance, and just like gaming consoles, there's got to be something for everyone, and there's no one headset to rule them all. I'm a Nintendo guy. I've never owned a Sony PlayStation or a Microsoft Xbox, and I probably never will, but that doesn't mean that I don't acknowledge their existence, and I don't acknowledge the need for those products to exist for other gamers who may not like, like Nintendo franchises, for instance. And the same thing applies to VR, especially when it comes to hardware. Not everyone wants a Quest for a multitude of reasons. Even if you take Meta, the company, and their business practices out of it, there are people who don't particularly care for this push towards standalone, especially people who prefer like the sharpest, best resolution picture you can get with inside a headset. And frankly, you're not going to get that either with a wireless connection via like Quest Link or Steam Link or something like that, or even virtual desktop, nor are you going to get it with a cord, because you're still going to get compression artifacts. Let me rephrase that. Nor are you going to get it with a USB cord, because you're still going to get compression artifacts. You just can't transfer that many data over a USB-C connection that fast. There is still a large contingent of VR fans who still swear by native DisplayPort inputs, and they'll never veer away from like their Valve Indexes, their Oculus DevKit 1s, their Rift S's, headsets like that. If you look at the usage on Steam, there's still a pretty significant number of people who are still on PC VR only headsets. And within that niche, there are people like, for instance, the simmer community who just play like Microsoft Flight Simulator all the time, and they want the best resolution, the highest quality fidelity possible. You're not going to get that with a standalone headset, or really for any headset that's going to run you less than $1,000, because there are always going to be compromises with those headsets. With these high-end headsets, the only compromise is price. The space that Somnium is entering into has really just been dominated by companies like Varo or Pimax or even HTC. But if you think it's odd to see an app developer come into this space with their own piece of hardware, remember that before they bought Oculus and rebranded, Meta was Facebook and Instagram. They were a social media site before they got into tech as well. So this isn't really unheard of, and I think when the Somnium executives kind of looked at the market and saw where it was going away from the stuff that they actually cared about. If you listen to interviews from Reggie Bajoy, and I'm going to apologize if I got his name pronunciation wrong, that's the CEO of Immersed, he said that his users for the Immersed app wanted higher resolution than what was currently available on the market because of the virtual screens and being able to read the text clearly. You'd have to bring the screen closer to you, because if you had this zoomed out to have like really particularly nice because if you zoomed it out to have multi-monitor displays the way you typically would like to work in a virtual environment, most of the text was unreadable. So he wanted to put out a headset specifically designed for his app that will allow people at a very high resolution to be as productive as possible. He also wanted something very, very light. For as light as some of the headsets have gotten recently, they're still about 500 grams, and that's not something you can comfortably wear for multiple hours at a time for most people. For people like me, I can wear my Quest for 5 or 6 hours. I can wear the Pico for 5 or 6 hours, but I'm the exception rather than the rule. So Renji wanted to make a headset that was very, very light, and pretty much if you look at pictures of it, it looks like a pair of sunglasses, and that's what the visor is. The visor is scheduled to start doing test runs with consumers later on this fall. The Bigscreen Beyond launched earlier this year because basically for the same reason as Immersed, the makers of Bigscreen said that the resolution on current market headsets, and their apps have been most popular on the Quest line, just as an example, the resolution is not high enough for people to enjoy the movies at the full resolution that they would like, or if they take their headset off and just look at their nice 4K OLED TV, the headsets can't really match that yet because it's just not up to that level of fidelity. So they put out the Bigscreen Beyond, which is a very, very tiny PCVR headset. It actually fits in the housing the most other headsets you can name. And this thing has micro OLED panels. I think it's 2560 by 2560 resolution per eye. Just the best possible picture you could get for stuff like PC VR gaming or for watching movies in VR. That was their only point in making the headset. So looking at companies like Immersed, like Somnium, like Bigscreen, what you're looking at is not a company that is trying to become the new market leader. These guys know that there are people out there who enjoy VR, specifically the way they enjoy VR, highest resolution, best fidelity, and they want to put out a headset for that specific market. I can't imagine that Somnium expects to sell more than, I don't know, 100K of these maybe. I may be a little bit low on the estimates. I don't know what their production scaling is going to look like. But frankly, for a company Somnium size with the manufacturing that they're going through, you don't need to sell millions of units to turn a massive profit. Especially since at this price that we're looking at, they're not subsidizing this headset at all like Meta and Pico did. Meta and Pico lose money every single time they sell a headset. These guys aren't really going for that. If they're turning a decent profit on each headset, if they sell 50 to 100,000, they're still going to turn a profit when you count in R&D and manufacturing and all of that. So am I going to buy one of these headsets? Most likely not. And I have a lot of questions. I'm going to get to the questions here in just a moment of what I have about this headset, and it's the same one I have about most other headsets. As the VR community continues to expand and start pulling in users that aren't traditional straight gamers, they may like different types of games or different types of experiences, I'm glad it exists for them, even if it's not for me. And I think the community in general could probably do a little bit better with that sort of mindset. It's okay for you to not think something is for you, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't exist. As for the questions I have, the main one, and I'm going to say this until I'm blue in the face, what don't we know? I said this when Quest 3 was about to launch. I'm on the record. I've said it in multiple videos. I said the same thing about PlayStation VR 2. And when those headsets launched, we quickly figured out what we didn't know. For instance, for all the specs and the glitz and the glam about PSVR 2, it wasn't until it got in the hand of actual consumers and not people who were doing 30-minute test runs in a very controlled environment where they only did specific things. That's when we started to learn about things like mirror and persistence and the motion blurring that came, and the people had to turn their headsets brightness down to be able to basically not throw up. Games like Horizon Call of the Mountain were like a poster child for one, all the great things about PSVR 2 and all of the problems with it. With Quest 3, because we were seeing this awesome, amazing color pass through, and then we put the headset on and it was grainy, it was unfocused, there was the hand warping, all those things that Meta did not really put out there because why would they? With the Pico 4 that was supposed to be Meta's primary contender, is supposed to enter into like the low-end consumer VR space, one, we didn't know that the US government was going to create a whole bunch of problems from Pico and basically prevent that headset from launching in the States. We also didn't know that their parent company, ByteDance, was going to pull their funding so quickly after the headset launch. Within like a year or so of the headset's launch, ByteDance was already scaling back how many developers they were funding and how much money they were putting into that division. They had already cut down the staff of Pico. There was another round of layoffs, and now Just Dance VR, which was the exclusive that Pico said on their announcement for Pico 4 was going to be their massive exclusive, Just Dance VR from Ubisoft, is now being launched on Quest. It was announced a few months ago that it would no longer be a Pico exclusive, and Ubisoft was working with a different developer to be able to bring the game to another market. That other developer, I believe, was Soul Assembly, the makers of Drop Dead the Cabin. With Bigscreen Beyond, that headset comes with a custom faceplate that is actually 3D printed. So what happens is you need to get an iPhone and do a scan of your face and send that into Bigscreen. And what they did was create a custom faceplate that was cued specifically to your IPD and your head size, so you got zero light bleed. It was fitted specifically to you. That immediately turned me off that headset because I like to pass my headset around. I've done demos with like friends and family. The big screen was going to be fit for that because my IPD is a lot wider than your average humans, so someone else would have gotten a blurry picture. But that was the thing that we didn't know, because when people started getting their Bigscreen Beyonds, you can go through subreddits and find tons of stories about this stuff. They were getting Bigscreen Beyonds with bad facial interfaces. Some of them were lopsided, so like one eye was sitting higher than the other. Some of them had the incorrect IPD and had to be sent back. Those are the questions we don't know when you deal with something like a custom faceplate. So now we're on the VR1 and there's a host of questions we don't know, but the main thing is, what don't we know? We don't know what their support model looks like yet. We don't know what their software support is going to look like yet. This will be a natively recognized Steam PC VR headset, so you won't have to deal with any outside apps like Steam Link, Virtual Desktop, AirLink, the Pico Streaming Assistant, so on and so forth. Steam should pick it up and recognize the headset right away, but we still don't know what we don't know. All the information we're getting so far is curated from Somnium, even though they had Sally's Bradley out for a test run and he was pretty honest about the quality of the lenses and how it still needed some work. This was several months ago. There's a video on Sally's Bradley's website you can check out for that. He did an interview with the CEO of the company. Until they get in the hands of mass consumers, because there's no accounting for having thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, whatever, of people using your product, that's when you start to see the full warts of everything. So I'm watching this from afar as a VR fan because I want to see what this looks like. I've seen a lot of companies like Pimax, for instance, release the Crystal, which had eye-popping stats when you looked at it on paper. But then when it got to people, the software was screwed up, the eye tracking wasn't working correctly, there were a host of problems with it. I know Mateo301 did a great video when he first got this Crystal, and just about how bad the experience was. Beardo Banjo did another video where he talked about just the setup process being so cumbersome. These aren't things we know until people get them in their hands and actually set them up. Buddy of mine, Croy VR, he was on the podcast last week talking about UEVR, is most likely going to be buying the Somnium VR 1. He's been pretty open about that. When that happens, I'll have him back on the podcast to talk about his experience as someone who has been a Starch Index user for years and years and years. This is going to be his first new headset in several years, and I'm interested to see what his growing pains are going into a new headset and really what the warts of this headset are. I think we can see all the good from the website when you look through the specs, but we're not going to know the bad until someone puts it on and says, whoa, okay, that's not good. Another question I have about the Somnium VR 1 is the developers have said that they want this to be basically an open source headset. By open, I mean you're going to have access to all the code that drives the software of the headset. You'll have access to all the cameras. If you buy the mixed reality camera pass-through, you're going to have access to the cameras, going to have access to the eye tracking data, the hand tracking data, all of that. So you can really build really robust applications using this headset. That remains to be seen. Again, that's something that I think this headset is going to be more for like the tinkering crowd, for people who really like to get into the nuts and bolts of what makes their headset tick. People who do a lot of like modded content, things like that. This is going to be a great headset for them. That's a fairly niche audience, so it's really going to depend on how good this headset is out of the gate in terms of how much buy-in that particular feature gets. But contrast that, and it's another reason that Somnium wanted to put out this headset, contrast that with platforms like Apple, and even though Mark Zuckerberg tries to tell you different, like Meta, where they're very closed and stuff is very curated, and there's only so much access to the data the headset is collecting that you as a developer have access to, or you as a user have access to. So if you're someone who likes to get to the nuts and bolts of everything, this may be the headset for you. Again, for me personally, this isn't really something I care about. I am very much a console baby. I grew up on Nintendo stuff. I want to be able to put on a headset and just play a game. This isn't something that I would invest in, but for people who are in that vein, I know tons of tinkerers in the VR community who love to like tweak their settings and spend hours. Croy's one of them, the guy who we interviewed last week about UEVR. He's one of them. He'll spend hours tinkering with stuff, messing with settings to get like the perfect UEVR experience. This is gonna be a great headset for someone like him. And there are way more people like him, like Croy, than I think people in the general VR community recognize. So when you think about it, you're asking yourself, why does this exist? Just think about the fact that this is not a headset that is going to be scaled to millions and millions of people. This is scaled for a very specific niche audience. And if they could target that audience, market to that audience, and get it in the hands of that audience, they could actually have a successful product. That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for checking out. If you want more of my content, you can check me out on Twitch. I stream there 4 days a week, VR at least 2 days a week, every Tuesday and Thursday at Live Open Mic. You can also find me on X at Live Open Mic and on the YouTube channel. This podcast and my other podcast, the XR Remix podcast, are available on YouTube, YouTube Music, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Thanks, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.